Once upon a time in a bustling city nestled in a valley between emerald mountains, there lived a young man named Leo. He was the kind of person people noticed not because he was loud, but because of how he carried himself. He was honest, hard-working, and kind to everyone. He grew up in a modest apartment, raised by his mother after his father passed away. Life had not always been easy, but Leo believed in prayer, hard work, and doing the right thing. Leo wasn't rich, but he was doing well. He ran a successful tech repair shop in the city center. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and he always treated people with respect. That was what made people admire him, and most of all, that was what made Isabella fall in love with him. This morning, Leo woke up earlier than usual. It was his wedding day. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the sunlight slipping through the blinds. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. He was excited. His best friend, Mark, knocked on the door and came in, already dressed in his matching suit. "Man, today is your day," Mark said, grinning from ear to ear. Leo smiled and nodded. "I still feel like I'm dreaming." Mark laughed. "You're not dreaming. Oh, you are getting married today to the most amazing woman in this city." Leo stood up and stretched his arms. "Let's go. I want to be ready early." They went outside where the courtyard of the event venue was already filled with activity. Chairs were being arranged, florists were moving up and down, and the aroma of roasted meat and seasoned rice was everywhere. His mother, Elena, came out of the kitchen area, wiping her hands on an apron. "My son," she said, smiling. "God has done it for us. Just look at today." Leo hugged her tightly. "Mama, I wish Papa was here to see this day." "He is watching from heaven," she replied. "He would be proud of you. Very proud." Inside the room, Leo began to get dressed. His suit was a crisp white. His cufflinks were neatly laid out on the table. As he buttoned his shirt, Mark stood by the mirror, adjusting Leo's tie. "You know, Isabella is really lucky to have you," Mark said. "Not every man will wait for a woman who was raised the way she was." Leo turned to him. "What do you mean?" Mark paused. "I just mean, you know, her family is not exactly the warmest. People say they're too proud and sometimes too secretive. But Isabella is different. I see how much she loves you." Leo looked away and smiled. "I don't care what people say. I know Isabella, and today I'll finally call her my wife." At the same time, in a grand, modern house on the hillside across the city, Isabella sat quietly in front of her dressing mirror. Her room was filled with people, makeup artists, hairstylists, bridesmaids, but she wasn't talking. She sat still as one of the girls applied powder to her cheeks. Her face looked calm, but her eyes told a different story. Every time she looked into the mirror, her expression changed. There was something distant in her gaze, as if she was listening to a voice no one else could hear. "Isabella, are you okay?" one of her bridesmaids, Chloe, asked. "Yes," Isabella said quickly, blinking fast. "I'm just thinking." Chloe smiled. "I understand. Brides always get nervous, but don't worry. Today will be perfect. Leo loves you." Isabella nodded and looked down at her hands. She touched her fingers one after the other like she was counting them. Then, as the veil was brought forward and placed gently on her head, the air in the room shifted slightly. The veil moved as if someone had brushed it from behind, but no one had. "Did you feel that breeze?" Chloe asked. "No," Isabella replied. Chloe looked around but said nothing more. Isabella's mother, Madame Dubois, stepped into the room. She was tall, elegant, and always carried herself like a queen. She smiled at her daughter, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "You look beautiful, my dear," she said softly. Isabella stood up. "Thank you, Mother." Madame Dubois walked closer and gently placed her hands on Isabella's shoulders. Remember what I told you, she whispered. Today must go smoothly. There is no room for mistakes. Isabella swallowed hard and nodded slowly. Her father, Mr. Du Bois, waited outside, pacing with a frown on his face. He wasn't the emotional type. His focus was on appearance, respect, and power. This wedding had to look perfect, no matter what. Back at the chapel, Pastor James was in his office, kneeling on the floor, deep in prayer. Lord, let your peace rest upon this wedding, he whispered. Let love reign in their home. Let no evil enter this house today. Suddenly, he paused. His heart started to beat a little faster. He opened his eyes and sat still. Something didn't feel right. He stood up slowly and looked out through the window. People were arriving, laughing, taking selfies, and showing off their outfits. But Pastor James's spirit was troubled. He placed his hand on his chest. What is this I'm feeling, Lord? There was no answer, just a deep silence. Then he heard a whisper, not in sound, but deep inside his spirit. Watch closely. Do not be distracted. Something is hidden. The pastor blinked. He had done many weddings in his life. But today felt different, like something else was going to take place, something that had nothing to do with flowers, cake, or celebration. He stepped away from the window and picked up his Bible. He whispered again, Lord, open my eyes. Meanwhile, the choir was rehearsing their final song. Ushers moved up and down, preparing to lead guests into the decorated chapel. The building looked perfect. White fabric draped along the pews, rose petals scattered on the aisle, and a giant arch of flowers standing proudly at the altar. Everything was ready. Leo and Mark arrived with the groomsmen, and the crowd outside began to cheer. Photographers surrounded them, capturing every step as they walked into the chapel. Leo's smile was wide. He greeted people as he passed, stopping only to hug his mother again before entering. Inside, he stood at the front, trying to keep calm. Mark leaned close. You look nervous. I feel like I'm about to explode, Leo whispered. In a good way. Relax. Everything is going to be fine. The music changed. People stood, the doors opened, and there she was. Isabella, dressed in white, taking slow, graceful steps. Her veil covered her face, but everyone could feel her beauty shining through. The entire chapel was silent. It was like something sacred had entered the room. Leo's heart raced as she walked toward him. She was perfect. He couldn't stop smiling. But behind Isabella, as she walked with her father, something strange happened. A little girl in the crowd began to cry. She pointed at Isabella and shouted, Mommy, her eyes. Her eyes are like snake eyes. Her mother quickly pulled her down and whispered, Stop that. Don't say such things in public. People around them laughed awkwardly and waved it off. Children and their imagination. But Pastor James had heard it. He turned sharply and looked at Isabella as she reached the front. His eyes narrowed. She looked calm. She didn't look like a snake, but the feeling in his chest grew heavier. He opened his Bible and whispered under his breath, Lord, if this is what I think it is, show me clearly. He turned to the couple and smiled. We welcome everyone here today to witness the holy union of Leo and Isabella. We are gathered in the presence of God to bless this marriage. Everyone clapped. But the pastor wasn't smiling fully anymore. He looked at Isabella again, then gently stepped forward and placed one hand lightly on her shoulder to pray. And just then he felt it. A chill shot through his arm like he had touched ice. He pulled back slightly. Something was very wrong. He looked into her eyes behind the veil. And for a moment, just one small moment, he saw it. The eyes were no longer soft and green. They were yellow, sharp, serpent-like. Pastor James's heart skipped a beat. He blinked, and they were gone, back to normal, but it was enough. He stepped back slowly and placed his Bible on the pulpit. Leo looked confused. The pastor swallowed hard. He stared at the crowd, then back at the bride. This was no ordinary wedding. This was the beginning of something much deeper. And so, just as the choir prepared to sing again, Pastor James quietly whispered to himself, "Lord, this is not just a wedding. This is war." The silence in the chapel was thick enough to choke on. The joyful song that had begun moments before died in the throats of the choir. All eyes were fixed on Pastor James, who stood motionless behind the pulpit, his face a mask of grim determination. He was no longer a man presiding over a celebration, he was a general surveying a battlefield. Leo's smile had vanished, replaced by a confused frown. "Pastor," he asked, his voice barely a whisper that carried in the dead quiet. "Is everything all right?" Before the pastor could answer, Isabella spoke. Her voice, when it came from behind the veil, was flat, devoid of its usual musical lilt. "Why have you stopped the ceremony, Pastor? We are waiting." The tone sent a fresh shiver down Pastor James's spine. It was the voice of someone who was not used to being questioned. "I have a question for the bride," Pastor James announced, his voice resonating through the sound system with an authority that brooked no argument. He ignored the protocol, the order of service, everything. "Isabella Dubois. Before God and these witnesses, do you come here today of your own free will?" A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the congregation. Madame Dubois shot up from her front row seat. "This is highly irregular. What is the meaning of this?" "Silence, please," Pastor James commanded, his eyes never leaving Isabella. "The bride will answer." Isabella stood perfectly still. The veil hid her expression, but her body was rigid. "Of course," she said, the words clipped and cold. "I am here to be married." "Are you?" the pastor pressed, taking a step closer. "Or has another will brought you to this altar?" Leo stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding his confusion. "Pastor James, that's enough. You're upsetting her." "Leo, my son," the pastor said, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "It is precisely because I care for you both that I must do this. Look at her. Truly look." Leo turned to Isabella. He saw the stiff set of her shoulders, the way her hands clenched her bouquet too tightly. "Bella," he whispered. "What's wrong?" Instead of answering, Isabella let out a low, guttural sound that was nothing like her. It was a hiss, soft at first, then growing in volume until it filled the chapel. The air grew cold. The floral arrangements on the altar seemed to wilt slightly, their vibrant colors dulling. "He is mine," a voice, layered and ancient, snarled from behind the veil. It was not Isabella's. The covenant was sealed in water and blood. "You cannot break it." Panic erupted. Guests screamed and scrambled back from the aisle. Mr. Dubois stared, his face pale with a terror that was more than shock, it was recognition. "You," the voice hissed, and Isabella's head swiveled unnaturally toward her mother. "You promised me her life, her path. You dare try to give her to another?" Madame Dubois crumpled into her seat, sobbing. "I didn't know. I thought it was just a blessing. For our fortune." The truth, once spoken, broke a spiritual seal. Isabella's body convulsed. She threw her head back, and a piercing shriek tore from her lips as the veil was flung back by an unseen force. The face revealed was Isabella's, but the eyes were blazing yellow orbs with slitted pupils. Her lips pulled back from her teeth in a vicious snarl. "The river demands its due," the spirit shrieked. Pastor James raised his Bible high. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you, spirit of deception, spirit of the ancient river, to loose your hold on this child of God." Isabella's body levitated a foot off the ground, her white gown flowing around her as if she were submerged. She hovered there, a terrifying angel of darkness. She pointed a long, graceful finger at Leo. "He will be my vessel now. His life for hers. No. Leo shouted, stepping forward despite the terror freezing his blood. Take me, then. But leave her. The spirit laughed, a sound of cracking ice and rushing water. Foolish boy. Your love is your weakness. Your hatred is your weakness. Pastor James thundered. The blood of Jesus Christ is stronger than any river's curse. Church, pray now. This time, the prayers that rose were not tentative. They were a roar. The faithful, now understanding the battle before them, cried out as one. The walls of the chapel seemed to vibrate with the power of their unified voice. Isabella, or the thing possessing her, writhed in mid-air, screaming as if in agony. The yellow light in her eyes flickered. I will not go. She is mine. She was bought with a price. Pastor James declared, advancing. She belongs to the one who died for her, not to a dead idol of a forgotten river. I command you, in Jesus' name, to come out of her. A final, ear-splitting shriek echoed through the chapel. A gust of wind, cold and smelling of dank water, exploded outward from Isabella, extinguishing the candles and blowing programs into the air. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Isabella dropped to the marble floor in a heap of white silk and lace. She lay completely still. For a terrifying second, there was absolute silence. Leo rushed to her side, skidding to his knees. Isabella. Bella, can you hear me? He cradled her head. Her skin was warm again. Her eyes fluttered open. They were her own beautiful, clear green, but now filled with tears and confusion. She looked up at Leo, her voice a fragile whisper. Leo. I was drowning. I was in a dark river, and you called me back. He held her tight, tears streaming down his face. I'm here. I've got you. Pastor James approached slowly, his face etched with exhaustion and relief. He placed a hand on Isabella's forehead. Welcome back, daughter. He then turned to the stunned congregation. The wedding was over, but a miracle had taken its place. The battle had been won, but the healing was just beginning. As ushers helped shocked guests to their feet and the Dubois family huddled together in tearful repentance, Pastor James knew the story of Leo and Isabella was far from over. Their love had been tested by fire and water, and it had held firm. Their real journey together was about to start. The chapel was a scene of surreal disarray. The air, once fragrant with roses, now carried the sharp scent of ozone and fear. Guests were huddled in small groups, some weeping, others praying in hushed, frantic tones. The elegant wedding had shattered into a spiritual emergency. Leo held Isabella, who trembled violently in his arms, her sobs muffled against his chest. She wasn't the serene bride nor the terrifying vessel of a moment ago, she was a trauma victim, fragile and broken. Pastor James moved with a weary authority. He gestured to Mark and a few other sturdy groomsmen. Help her to my office. Gently now. He then turned to the congregation, his voice firm but compassionate. Friends, family. What you have witnessed today is a stark reminder that our fight is not against flesh and blood. A great victory has been won here, but the service is concluded. Please, go home in peace. Pray for this family. Give them space to heal. There were no arguments. People filed out silently, their faces pale, casting backward glances filled with a mixture of awe and terror. The Dubois family remained, an island of shame and shock. Madame Dubois was nearly catatonic, supported by her stone-faced husband. In the quiet of the pastor's book-lined office, Isabella was settled onto a soft leather couch. A kind-faced older woman from the church, Deaconess Clara, brought a blanket and a cup of sweet tea. Leo knelt beside the couch, never letting go of Isabella's hand. Pastor James closed the door, shutting out the chaos. He pulled up a chair opposite them. Isabella, he began, his voice gentle. The spirit is gone. But we must understand what happened to ensure it never returns. The truth is your protection now. Isabella took a shaky breath. It's always been there, she whispered, her eyes distant. A shadow. A coldness. I thought it was just, me. That I was anxious. Or wrong, somehow. She looked at her mother, who had been ushered in by her father. Mom, the stories you told me about the family guardian, by the mountain river, the special baths as a child. Madame Dubois flinched as if struck. It was for protection. For prosperity. The priestess said it would make you beautiful, secure your future. It was a lie, mother. Isabella's voice cracked with a pain deeper than anger. You didn't secure my future, you mortgaged it. I felt it every time I was happy. It was like a leash, pulling me back. And when I met Leo. She turned to him, her eyes brimming. The feeling got stronger. The closer we got, the more it hated him. Mr. Dubois finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. We were fools. Desperate fools chasing wealth. We have brought this curse upon our own child. He looked at Pastor James. What must we do? Full renunciation, Pastor James stated. Not just here, in private. But at the source. The spiritual legalities must be undone where they were forged. He pulled her into an embrace, holding the woman he loved, finally and fully herself. 3 months later, in the same chapel, a much smaller, quieter ceremony took place. There were no extravagant floral arches or a large choir. The guests were only their closest family and friends who had stood with them through the storm. When Isabella walked down the aisle, her eyes met Leo's and held them. They were clear, green, and held no shadows. There was no veil. Pastor James smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. Dearly beloved, he began, we are gathered here today not just to celebrate a union, but to witness a testament. A testament to truth, to deliverance, and to a love that refused to be broken by darkness. When he asked, do you, Isabella, take Leo to be your husband, her I do was strong, clear, and filled with a joy that brought tears to every eye. It was not the wedding they had planned. But as they exchanged rings under the gentle light of the chapel windows, Leo and Isabella knew, with a certainty that went to their bones, that it was the wedding they were always meant to have. Their story had begun with a battle, but their life together was founded on a victory. And this time, when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the peace in the chapel was absolute.